can we talk a little bit about breastfeeding? I know you mentioned this in your book, and in Denmark, only about 11% of children are fully breastfed at 6 months, which is the minimum time that's recommended by health authorities, global and national health authorities. And I know when I was breastfeeding my children, I had twins, and my doctor was concerned for my health and thought that I should wean them off when they were about 12 months. But I just wonder, what are the consequences of us not breastfeeding our children at, for years like they used to?
It's always fascinating to me when modern science thinks we can outwit nature and evolution. Like this idea that oh, we're supposed to be doing this for this. Well, how did our ancestors survive? That doesn't make any sense. So I want to be clear, I'm a dude. I will never breastfeed anything. The last thing I'm going to do is lecture anybody about breastfeed. That is the last thing I will ever do. The only thing I can offer you is information I've learned from experts in the field who have done studies and looked at the difference that breastfeeding will have on facial structure, on airway health, on the straightness of your teeth when you're older. Obviously, the longer someone would breastfeed, the more you're going to be building up the skeleture, the musculature of the face, the more outward that face is going to grow to that attractive prognathic face, right? With that, the mouth is going to grow larger, larger airways, larger mouth, straighter teeth. So to me, it's especially when a kid is developing so quickly and their bones are very malleable, right? Very, very soft at that age. The inputs you put into this kid they're going to respond to that. So this is not an indictment of anyone who is bottle feeding. I was bottle fed I think my mom breastfed me at 6 months. She's like, nobody was doing that for 6 months back in the day. Like everybody was on formula and bottle feeding. So to me, that makes perfect sense. The more exercise, and breastfeeding causes the face to grow outward. But equally as important as breastfeeding is to have infants wean on real food, to not just go to can of applesauce and can of mushed peas and a can of carrots and a can of dried stuff put with water. I mean, the idea that people are now saying it's unhealthy or unadvisable to wean a kid onto regular food. What the heck did humans do for the past 2.5 million years? There was not Gerber's baby food soft carrots 200 years ago. And there's a reason why we all have crooked teeth and our faces are pretty much deformed and our airways are smaller and our sinus cavities are smaller today. And there's a reason why all our ancestors who weren't eating this food, they all had huge sinus cavities, huge mouths, huge airways. This is why. So
chewing real food.
Chewing real food, and it's not like you can say, oh, okay, I'm now going to go chew, in middle age. This is something that has to be a part of your lifestyle. And it doesn't need to be complex. So modern humans do a really good job of making the simplest things very complex. But this is just eating real food. Again, the closer you get to nature, the body comes into balance. You're just doing what we have evolved to do and evolved to respond to, which is to go from breastfeeding for a couple years. In some cultures, we're breastfeeding for 4 years, right? And then going straight to real food, which causes you got to really chew, especially if you're a young kid. That's scary for a lot of people because they said, oh, the kids are going to choke. Then why didn't all of our ancestors choke to death? It's just, this is not my theory. It's not my hypothesis. This is clearly documented. by so many experts in the field, and it makes perfect sense too once you start thinking about it.
Yeah, I remember having such fear that my children would choke if I gave them a carrot, like a whole carrot. That was just too scary for me. I would cut it, slice it, whatever, smaller pieces. But I was really happy when I realized that I was doing something right by breastfeeding my children for a long time, even though there's a lot of cultural barriers and a lot of actually social stigma to breastfeeding for a long time. At the same time, there's a lot of stigma, as you just pointed out, that you don't want to make anyone feel bad about not being able to breastfeed, because a lot of people actually would like to breastfeed their children, and for some reason they can't, and work and all these obligations that we have.
There's so many pressures on people living in the industrial world, from work, breastfeeding every 2 hours. Like, who has time for that? Especially if a mom is working. I totally get it. So it's not the end of the world if a kid is on a bottle early, but you will have to make adjustments in order to allow that development to really take place to the diet, and not feed a kid just all this soft modern food. Again, this is not a lecture from me. I learned a lot of this from Dr. Mariana Evans and Dr. Kevin Boyd. They're the leaders in the field. There's a book called Led Weaning, which is supposed to be a very good book. I've read it for people to get more advice on that. But it's allowing the face to develop properly, and we have not allowed ourselves to do that. I'm a perfect example of this. I ate just modern, processed, canned crap. This was all anybody was eating when I was growing up. There was nobody that had a garden that was eating raw veg. That was unheard of. And you see what happens because of that, how people develop and respond to it.
Yeah.